Good morning and welcome to the Eclectic Radical. We are live on this special Wednesday version of the show. As always, though, I am Chris Richards, the Eclectic Radical. My co-host, Youri Smouter, is with us again. He's been doing a good job of being able to making it lately, and I really appreciate that. And with us is one of my favorite guests of all, Renee Johnston. How are you doing, Renee?
I am surviving as best as capitalism allows.
I know that feeling. That reminds me to remind everyone else. I did lose my day job at the end of January, so if you can afford to sign up for the Patreon and help keep this paying for itself, that would be a real help with the stress. I'm not asking for large amounts of money yet, but support for the show would really help. The last 2 months I've had to dip into other funds to pay for the show. It's not paying for itself anymore, so any help I can get, I would appreciate.
And remember, folks, it is money better spent if you become a Patreon to Chris, as opposed to the multiple overpriced streaming services. And you certainly don't need Spotify. All the music is for free on YouTube. Hashtag just saying.
And I mean, I'm probably going to start going through. If people want want a better take on some of the news that's happening, I'm probably going to start doing commentary on news clips as well. But for the purpose of today, we are here to talk about the sometimes great, and the sometimes disappointing Jesse Jackson.
I was wondering how you were going to get the great, like how we're going to work out the great part of this sentence that's about to come.
So, I'm going to start with the great part right away, because I don't think there's a better praise that you can give to Jesse Jackson than this, especially when we talk about identity versus class politics and how they interact, is that, in the 1950s, a governor of Arkansas named Orville Faubus became very famous for resisting the integration of Little Rock Central High School in Little Rock. In 1988, this same governor, Orville Faubus, was one of the only Democrats with national stature to endorse Jesse Jackson, who, of course, had been on the other side of the civil rights era from Orville Faubus, endorsed Jesse Jackson for president, saying that, he had made a lot of mistakes over his career, and the biggest mistake he had ever made was not understanding that the poor white man and the poor black man need to get together and fuck the rich white man before he fucks the rest of us. And he said the person who taught him that truth was Jesse Jackson, and that's why he thought Jesse Jackson should be president. Now, we can say a lot about identity politics and whether Jesse Jackson was good or bad, but I mean, he made Orville Faubus recognize class politics by his identity advocacy, and that's something that we really have to give some credit for, I think.
Oh, maybe.
It's worth noting, too, that Bill Clinton's reputation as a Democratic star was built on beating Orville Faubus in Arkansas primaries, not beating the segregationist evil version of Orville Faubus from the left, but beating the progressive egalitarian Orville Faubus from the right.
Right.
I think you're being too harsh, Chris. I mean, Bill Clinton played the sax great on Arsenio Hall, and Toni Morrison said he was the first black president.
Was it Arsenio Hall? Was it really Arsenio Hall?
It was Arsenio Hall.
It was.
Back when there was a syndicated late night talk show that was very nearly as successful as the network talk shows.
That's correct.
And it was hosted by a black man.
Yeah.
And it was hosted by a black man who, whether it is true or not, and I tend to believe them when they say they're not, but a black man who is accused of being Magic Johnson's secret boyfriend.
No comments. No comments.
That's one of my favorite facts about Arsenio Hall, though. Is that he was accused of being Magic Johnson's secret boyfriend when Magic Johnson said he had AIDS.
Fascinating.
Huh. They were lifelong buddies.
But going back to Jesse Jackson.
Yeah.
Right. So, Messy Jesse. As I've always, that's always the nickname I've appreciated, Messy Jesse. He was a great orator. He could give a good speech.
Yes.
He did in his, way, encourage young Black people to repeat the words, "I am somebody," which, for all the problems that came with all the other things that he was doing, I will always appreciate any public figure who does anything to remind little Black children that, like, they don't have to be ashamed of being little Black children, right? That said, I just, for everything that people celebrate Jesse Jackson for, none of it in any way, shape, or form helped to actually advance Black communities, advance Black people in this country in general. And so I always have a difficult time raining praise upon people for whom only help to solidify the reality that only a few Black people are going to be allowed to achieve and to move forward, so that the powers that be can point to those people as an example of what everyone else should be fighting to get to, even though they're well aware that those people are only there because they've been allowed to be there. So it's, it's a struggle, and it's a hard, people don't want you talking about the Black greats, right? They don't want to talk about Jesse Jackson as someone who somehow got credited for the Rainbow Coalition, even though the actual Rainbow Coalition was started by Fred Hampton and the Black Panther Party.
Rainbow Coalition 2.0.
Right. And so there's all these questionable things, and Jackson's version of the Rainbow Coalition was not the Rainbow Coalition.
A liberal pressure group in the Democratic Party, basically.
Right. So, I struggle because although I recognize that he was heralded and he certainly got much further than a lot of Black folks within the political arena, because it reaped no benefits at all for the general population of Black people, I just have a really hard time heaping too much praise.
And that's totally fair. Go ahead, Youri.
Well, if I could comment on, if I could comment on this, first of all, I don't disagree at all with anything Renee just said about Jesse Jackson, and the fact that she called him Messy Jesse Jackson. Oh my gosh, I'm thinking of my favorite Black superhero, Colin Muhammad, and the way he would mock Jesse Jackson and the I am somebody, but that's way too Black for even the best of our Black leftist audience, because Colin Muhammad was so controversial. But I do want to say the following about Jesse Jackson. And actually, Chris, I actually give you credit for what I'm about to say. Now, my whole life as a Black leftist, I basically was very hostile towards Jesse Jackson. I would give him credit where credit is due. including Al Sharpton, until I got to know more about some of the skeletons in Al Sharpton's closet. But I was basically of the opinion that, like, yeah, they were great, like, black civil rights leaders, but they were way too loyal to the Democratic Party, which was only going more and more to the right. I was one of the only people, for example, that saw the bullshit on the and the red flags when they came to Obama. While everybody else is going through Obama mania, I was thinking to myself, what the hell is everybody smoking? Well, and is there like...
I think it's almost... It actually makes sense in a way to compare Jesse Jackson to Al Sharpton, because Jesse Jackson represented the Democratic Party's takeover of Martin Luther King Jr.'s movement. And Al Sharpton sort of represents the shift to the right that the Democratic Party has forced on the NAACP and similar groups.
And at the same time, it's so easy sometimes to defend Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton, because a lot of their like hardcore opponents are, of course, the most like, you know, disgusting far right racist douchebags and stuff like that. And but I just want to say, I think when it comes to Jesse Jackson, that first of all, I don't disagree at all with what Renee with what Renee's historical assessment of Jesse Jackson. But I think Jesse Jackson is this, and I thank you, Chris, for actually educating me further on Jesse Jackson, because we had done a show on why did George McGovern lose. Why did Walter Mondale lose in trying to unseat Ronald Reagan? Why did Michael Dukakis lose against George H.W. Bush? And in between all of that, of course, is the insurgent rise of Jesse Jackson trying to get the nomination for the Democratic Party. And I knew that Jesse Jackson ran for president twice, but I didn't realize how much of a, dare I say, it was pretty much a very left-wing insurgent he was waging, and the fact that he really was trying to reach out to people Democrats say should vote for them, but always throw them under the bus, like the queer community, Native Americans, Korean Americans, Japanese Americans, West Asian, the broad diaspora, Middle Eastern Americans, and so forth like that. And it's just interesting that Jesse Jackson, he was really attacked and marginalized by the unions, the supposedly black progressive caucus, the black left caucus, and all of those guys, because he was considered like Ralph Nader before there was a Ralph Nader, or Bernie Sanders before there was a Bernie Sanders. And I think we too often, those on the left, especially the black left, I think we too often overlook that part of Jesse Jackson. Now, whatever criticisms you want to make of Jesse Jackson as a black misleadership class leader and a grifter and somebody who constantly is loyal to a party which is so disloyal to not just the black community but all working class communities.
Well, to him personally, let's point out right there that the Democratic Party was disloyal to Jesse Jackson personally in the worst kind of way.
Yeah.
And hello, Andrew. Good morning, and thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, but that being said, I think we too often overlook the good of Jesse Jackson, sure. and I think what happened with Jesse Jackson is what happens with so many people who believe in taking over the Democratic Party, reforming the Democratic Party, is that there is no change in the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party, though, will change you into a pseudo-leftist, a fake leftist, and just controlled opposition. So whatever criticisms people want to make of Jesse Jackson, when Bill Clinton became president onwards, I agree with you. Here. But the Jesse Jackson of the 70s and the 80s, I think we should give him a little bit more credit than we often do give him.
But it's worth noting that in 1992, Jesse Jackson endorsed Bill Clinton and threw all the people who supported him in 1984 and 1988 under the bus. Democratic
politics. What can you? But I don't know what to say to that. I mean,
just real quick, I'll just say here my issue always with giving anyone any kind of credit for saying that they're going to try and change the party within. We have centuries of knowing that you cannot do this. It does not work, right? It's not possible. The party can choose to change, but no one's going to go into the party and change the party.
And it's worth noticing he was fighting a losing holding action against this new white Democratic Party that we complain about now all the time, and he lost. And while he should get credit for the fight, he shouldn't get credit for the submission afterwards.
Right. And he also shouldn't, in my opinion, the minute your sell is join me and we'll change the Democrats from within, you've already lost me.
Yeah.
Right? Like
how come?
Because there is that's not happening. It's not happening. It's never happened. It's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. It's not happening.
I'll give something. I'll do something here to perhaps give Renee a little more ammo if she wants. I don't want to talk about it too much because I'm me, but I want to bring it up so that someone else can talk about it. In the 1980s, in the 1970s, you have the white middle class revolution where Democrats like Joe Biden start running against liberal and or black Republicans in what were safe Republican seats in places like Massachusetts and New York and Delaware. Though Delaware, their safe Republican seat was held by Cale Boggs, who was a liberal Republican who had voted for both Civil Rights Acts and was the minority leader of the Senate and had been one of the most important liberal allies to the liberal faction of the Democratic Party in passing the Great Society. Paul Tsongas, who ran a few years later and was in the Senate for the Democrats from Massachusetts for years, actually ran against Ed Brooke, the man who wrote the Fair Housing Act, when he was the first post-Reconstruction senator black senator in the U.S. and the first ever black senator from a northern state. Which that doesn't get talked about enough. Is that Ed Brooke was the first black senator from a northern state, as opposed to the traditional black parts of the South, as the Reconstruction era senators were. And unlike the Reconstruction era senators who were seated in a sort of a show of force, not that I'm saying there's anything wrong with it, but who were seated in a show of force to force integration on the South, he was actually elected. And the Democrats targeted him on purpose because they wanted to harvest the Nixon era white angst and use it. And this is what created Bill Clinton later. And Jesse Jackson was the only person fighting against it. But in the end, when he endorsed Bill Clinton, he was betraying every endorsement. And this symbolizes this 80s split in the civil rights movement between your John Lewis's and your Julian Bonds. To give a very good example, there was a very divisive race for Congress in Atlanta that John Lewis ended up winning, in which he accused fellow civil rights icon Julian Bond of being a woman-chasing cokehead and not fit to be in Congress because Julian Bond was supporting the kind of politics John Lewis once supported and John Lewis no longer was. And that change in this and that sort of conflict in the civil rights movement in the 80s, I think that sort of sets the stage for where we are now in a lot of ways. What do you think, Renee?
I think you're right. And I think and you know what? And I have to say this, right? Like it's very easy right now in 2026 to look back at 1988 and say, oh, they should have did this and they should have
of course.
did that, right? Like it's a whole, I want to remind people like this is a whole different era, right?
Yes.
And so, and I'm I remember the campaign. Like, I'm old enough to have watched Jesse Jackson on TV, right? Like, so I don't say this as someone who like who's looking at it and like, oh, well, that was cool that they did it then. Like, I was old enough to understand what was happening. I was born in 76. So as these two campaigns were happening, I was fully cognizant of who Jesse Jackson was and all these things. And I can remember at the time as a child being like, oh, that's cool. Like, look at this Black dude doing the things, right? And so when I speak of looking back and understanding it now for all the problems that it actually was at the time that I wouldn't have understood then, right, as a kid. And that a lot of people don't understand because so many people are focused on representation and having a quote unquote seat at the table and all the other things that they say to identify what it feels like to see yourself in a space where you normally don't see yourself, right? Like, I understand all of those things, but at the core of it, there is a deeply problematic, it's so deeply problematic, the entire function of our electoral system, right? that you know, as an adult now looking at it, I can't help but to just see him as another part of this deeply problematic system, right? So you get to Jesse Jackson, and then you have to remember that he is a pathway to Obama, and Lord have mercy, yes. Right? And so so whatever you are one of the things that created a path for that.
There was a sort of, and I
wait, Chris. Renee had just like one last sentence to say about the rise to Obama.
Yeah, it's just, you know, like you're one of the openings to someone who dropped the most bombs, who deported the most people, who saved the most banks, who arrested the most journalists, like all the things, right? Like, it's really like people have to be able in hindsight to understand how all of these things are part of a pathway that allowed this system to continue to be what it continues to be.
And let's talk about Barack Obama. I had mentioned a bit about Henry Louis Gates before the show started. Now we mention Obama. This makes me think of Jesse Jackson in another way. And I'm thinking of the beer summit. And it's like, there was this real belief among a lot of white people that Barack Obama was going to be Jesse Jackson just because he was Black.
Wait, say that again?
There was a belief among a lot of white Democrats, liberal, especially more liberal white Democrats. I say this in the liberal is a good thing sense, not the liberal is a bad thing sense. There was a sense among many more liberal Democrats, wrongfully as it turned out, to show you that liberals aren't immune to racism the way they pretend. But there was a wide belief that Barack Obama was going to be Jesse Jackson because he was Black.
Oh, unfortunately, it wasn't just the white idlibs, the white idiot liberals. There were lots of dumb people that were also saying a version of that, unfortunately.
And I hate to give the foundational Black American movement too much ammo, but I will ask the question: how representative, even if we're just doing the representative politics thing, how representative of poor and working class Black Americans are the comparatively well-off children of immigrants?
That's a good question. I'm pretty sure, having seen enough of
for all the publicity that was made of Barack Obama's mother being a single mother and this being sort of a working class story, she is a single mother with well-off parents who could take care of her son for her.
Yeah, but I'll just say just in response to the foundational Black Americans, these toxic wastes of oxygen and space, especially online space, is they would. I think they would argue that it's much more easier to be a rich poor immigrant in the United States than to be a born and bred Black American who really constantly has to pull themselves up by the bootstrap. These are the same people who will complain about the Korean store merchants and why can't we have a Chinatown? Why can't we have a little Italy? Why can't we get special treatment like the Jews? And there is some truth. There is some truth. But their response is just a very reactionary Black American first.
I was a kid in Southern California during the whole Rodney King episode. The riots would have to support the rioters there. I'm sorry.
Definitely.
But it's worth noting. It's worth noting that one of the fundamental problems with the owners of Korean grocery stores in Black neighborhoods during that period was not the somewhat racist and divisive argument that we often hear, but the fact that they kept killing Black kids. The people who worked at the stores or owned the stores had guns and would shoot Black kids when they thought they were being robbed, and sometimes they weren't being robbed. And exactly. I think it's important to mention that, but that's also a class issue where much more than race, the owner of the store is shooting someone he believes of lower class who he thinks is stealing from him.
Well, yeah, but I think when it comes to America and the racial caste system, if that's even the right description, and how you integrate and how you become, one of the boys, white boys, or whatever you want to call it, I think it goes a little something like this, and because we were talking off the air about Henry Louis Gates' ridiculous, stupid documentary about Black people and their relations to, let's face it, mostly white Jews, not Jews, mostly white Jews. I think we should always say that. And I think it goes a little something like this. In the United States, which is a settler colonial country, which has pillaged and raped and stolen all of the land from Native Americans and half of Mexico, and those survivors and descendants are still living in abject poverty and brutal subjugation because us whites won the war and so forth. Anybody who wants to get ahead in the U.S. just has to bully those people in order to get a leg up. And I think when we talk about America, white America, multicultural America's relations with Black America, it's very much a similar thing. You, the poor immigrant from Poland, from Romania, from Ireland, and you came from the poorest of the poorest, the most marginalized. If you want to integrate in the United States, if you want to be one of the boys, if you want to get a leg up, you steal land from Native Americans and you consider them unpeople, and then you engage in bullying Black people and so forth like that. And there's always stories of the Irish Americans who were first friends with Black Americans, and then the moment, America gave them a good deal, they threw their Black comrades under the bus. And I think I think in a nutshell, that is Black and white Jewish relations in a nutshell. Yes, there were some white Jews that were white liberals, and I'm talking about the kind Malcolm X spoke out against.
Hey, remember
that,
Remember, this is the country whose modern racial system is built on the white indentured servants selling out the Black indentured servants for the right to become overseers. What do you think, Renee?
The whole situation. And you'll have to pardon me, everybody, because I always think of things so broadly. And
why you're here.
Yeah, the reason I think of things so broadly is because I feel like all the time when you have conversations with liberals, white liberals, all liberals, Black people who are in this leadership class, black faces in high places, all these things, right? They want you to focus on the thing that they want you to focus on, so that you fail to understand that there's just a larger system at play, that no matter what crumb they give you for your loyalty, vote, whatever thing they're trying to gain for you in the moment that they're talking to you about this thing, that's the most important thing that you got to think about in the moment. It's to distract you from the fact that the whole system is fucked, right?
Yeah.
And so I have really good friends who are liberals who, you know, are firmly ensconced in the Democratic Party, and we can do the thing and we just, right? And so I always have to like draw them out from the narrow view of like, just look. So I'll give you an example. So I have a friend who was very upset about SNAP benefits.
Yeah.
Right? And couldn't understand why I was not equally upset about SNAP benefits. And I had to say to her, I was like, listen, it's not that I don't think SNAP benefits are necessary. People need to eat. So of course, SNAP benefits are necessary. But I need you to understand that when they say 30 million people are going to lose their SNAP benefits, right? That is 10%, less than 10% of the US population, right? And we live in a country where 2%, 1% of the US population has all the wealth of the bottom 90%, right? And so when you talk about the importance of keeping SNAP benefits, you are talking about keeping us locked into a system where you're forgetting about the other 70% of people who cannot eat. So I, as a person who understands that, yes, those 30 million people need their SNAP benefits, I also understand that there is another 270 million people who never qualified for SNAP benefits because they weren't the poorest of the poor, but they also cannot eat. And so what I implored her to do is to understand that she is fighting for a battle that will save, yes, maybe it will help to save those 30 million, but the system was already set up to leave another 270 million out. And so I can't cheer for the 30 million and demand for the 30 million, because I want to demand for the 300 million. That's what I want. I want everybody to be able to eat, right? I mean, not just a selected few people that the government has decided is poor enough that they should be able to eat.
My thoughts on SNAP, if somebody really asked me about why is no one talking about combining the SNAP administration with the Social Security Administration in a way that gives every American money to spend on food?
That part.
Because that would help people.
Think about it. We could, if we wanted, create a system like food stamps that was universal for everyone. It would be very, very close to the universal basic income that everybody talks about all the time, and that people increasingly demand. And that this sort of universal right to food is not something that ever gets talked about. We talk about food deserts, and to his great credit, someone who is now mayor of New York is still talking about public grocery stores owned by the city to make sure there's some place that people can get food. But then, we put that public grocery store in your neighborhood, but that doesn't automatically give you money to spend on food. Go ahead, Youri.
Sure. Well, sort of going back though to Jesse Jackson. And again, I think we should give a little bit of credit where credit is due. What I find what's quite scandalous though about the Jesse Jackson of the 70s and the 80s was again how much hostility the supposedly left, including the radical left, gave him. And I think in the end of the day, rightly or wrongly, Jesse just gave up really trying to fight it. I think he really felt, well, look, I got third place first time around. I got second place this time around. The movement is advanced and so forth. I've gotten all these people into the Democratic Party, and now I'm a bit tired now. It's up to everybody else to try to fight the system and so forth. Because the Jesse Jackson, the reason, and I want to push back a little bit about him sort of, laying the roots and the red carpet for Obama is that Jesse Jackson actually was like a flaming left winger, whereas Obama, I knew from the moment I listened to a few interviews of him that he was a boring, uninspiring, centrist windbag of the highest order. And I, for the life of me, cannot understand why so many people, including people way more informed and way more to the left to me, was falling for the nonsense that Obama was this flaming neo-FDR, Jesse Jackson of the 70s and 80s. And then, oh my gosh, on foreign policy, some people were saying that he was like Ron Paul and Dennis Kucinich. So
I just want to say, flaming leftist to me is a stretch, right? And here's one reason why. Jesse Jackson was in full support of the two-state solution in Palestine, right? And so these are things that, for me,
I do want to say, because obviously it looks like the two-state solution is untenable now. I do want to say that when we trash the two-state solution, we should remember that Hamas is still in favor of a two-state solution in
Hamas
Palestine.
is trying to make sure that their people don't get killed off the planet. They don't have a choice but to say we're going to support the two-state solution, because they're trying to prevent 2 million people from getting blown off the planet into the ocean.
But at the same time, it's important to understand that if you were to believe our media, Hamas doesn't support the two-state solution, and it's the Palestinians' fault. Wherein the fact is, the Palestinians have agreed to every peace plan the Israelis have ever offered them, and then the Israelis have always taken it back off the table when they found out the Palestinians would agree to it.
Right. The problem, unfortunately, with the two-state solution is there can be no two-state solution with a group of people who have no interest in a two-state solution.
And that's really, and that's what it comes down to.
And so,
and Israel believes in the one-state solution, but their one-state solution is we want our ethnocracy and we want the remaining parts of that ethnocracy for us, Gaza, West Bank, and East Jerusalem.
And the 1% of the population. I'm sorry, not population. The 1% of the electorate, so smaller than the population. The 1% of the electorate that supports a two-state solution supports a two-state solution too radical for the mainstream Israeli government to ever agree to, because, and I gotta say that I do respect this about both the Arab left parties in Israel and Hamas. The Arab two-state solution includes a right of return for Palestinians and equal rights that essentially would turn Israel into one secular democratic state that ultimately would be ruled by Palestinians if democracy really wins in the end.
Right.
Well, and then the other problem with the two-state delusion is, even if you do think that this is the only game in town, the two-state delusion, hate to break up the party for people who still believe in liberal Zionism and think that it's just Likud and the far-right coalition basket of deplorables that are an obstacle to peace. But Yair Lapid, the Labor Party, which is almost nowhere anymore, and the other liberal Zionist parties who do want Netanyahu's head on a platter, but still do support him when it comes to lighting the region on fire and genociding Palestinians. All of those guys who claim they want the two-state solution, when you ask them, okay, we're getting somewhere, so you do know that you have to get rid of all those illegal settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Oh, no. We don't want to do that. So, yeah.
Right. And in the end, I mean, Grant, period, there is no there is no interest for the Zionists in allowing the Palestinians to remain on their land, right? And there's no interest in the Zionists for leaving Lebanon alone. And there's no interest in the Zionists for leaving Syria alone. Like, all of these places are under attack because at the core of it, white supremacy wants to rule all things, right? And so anytime you give any leeway to give, the Palestinians can want what the Palestinians want. I am never going to tell a Palestinian, like, you should want this thing. I, however, am well aware that when you are trying to avoid death, there are compromises that you will make. But at the core of it, when you are dealing with a white supremacist regime who has no interest in anything but in instituting homogeny and making sure that they rule the world, there is no room for two-state solutions. There's no room for it because they won't allow it, no matter what they, no matter what.
But that being said, Renee, and I don't disagree with you at all. I really don't disagree with you at all. But that being said, way before all of us became way more informed on all things historic Palestine, the two-state solution was basically like, well, look, Israel is here to stay. It's a settler colonial state like Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the US, Canada. It ain't going anywhere. Two-state solution was basically like a compromise. And the Palestinians now, and this is a whole other topic for another day, but it's a very disturbing story. We talk about a black misleadership class. We talk about a queer misleadership class, indigenous, and a left, often a white working class misleadership class. The Palestinians got a misleadership class on a whole nother level if we really want to look into Yasser Arafat's legacy. And I think Jesse Jackson and all those people really thought that Yasser Arafat was this Che Guevara type of person. And I think in the end of the day, we all got conned on the two-state solution, which in the end of the day only empowered the PLO to be the colonial viceroy that they are. And I think it was too little too late, but the PLO, which was always going to be a misleadership class to begin with, I think when they realized that, oh, Israel really does not want to give us at least Gaza, West Bank, and East Jerusalem. And even if we give them East Jerusalem in exchange for the West Bank and Gaza, they're not interested. They really do want to eradicate us. And it was too little too late, and then Yasser Arafat got poisoned. And
I'm willing to give Arafat a certain amount of slack. He had been fighting all his life and thought he really saw an opportunity for peace, and he didn't believe he could pass it up. That said, he was totally fucked by Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
And this should never be forgotten. And then Bill Clinton totally failed to in any way force Netanyahu to follow even the framework laid out at Oslo, which was nowhere near good enough. Once Netanyahu was in power, there was no pressure at all. He could do what he wanted, just like now. Why? Because Netanyahu is a thug for the Americans whose job was always to make Israel more pro-America.
Oh, yeah.
Now, you could say it's backfired in some ways if you want, but at the same time, at no time in history has Israel ever been so closely aligned to American Christians.
But then going back to Jesse Jackson,
which is a failure, which I think it should be considered a failure on the part of left-leaning religious leaders like Jesse Jackson.
Well. If we talk about historic Palestine to begin with, the global, largely white Christian movement has completely thrown Palestinian Christians under the bus because they're all a bunch of ignorant dumbasses that think that all Arabs are Muslims and that all Palestinians must be Muslims, and ergo they do not deserve our compassion. And then when you actually tell them, you do know that there are Christian communities and that Palestinians are some of the oldest Christians, and then you talk to them about the Armenian Christian community that got safe haven in Syria, in Iraq, in the Jordans, and in historic Palestine, and then the mental gymnastics they go of, yeah, well, well, they're not white, are they? White Christianity, Sig Heil. So,
and I just want people, I wanted to make sure that I could verify it before I said it out loud, because it was kind of like in my brain as something that I believed happened. So, even as recent as 2024, okay, this is what the coalition under Jackson's leadership was telling folks. Jackson and the rest of the coalition have also urged America to abide by its regulations and condition funding, not stop funding, condition funding to Israel on its adherence to U.S. law. Okay, so I recommend they let everyone out, Jackson said. The captives should be able to go home under the supervision of the United Nations, and anyone brought to trial should do so in the world court. Okay? So there's like, I want people to be clear that my aggravation with this situation is, even in 2024, he still was pushing for a ceasefire, when it's clear that ceasefires only exist for the people that they want to put down their guns, not for the oppressors.
Yeah.
Right? So there is a lot here, that I want people to just remember that when you are fully bought in to the electoral system of the duopoly, which exists in this country, you are never, and I mean it when I say never, you are never going to be a part of that democratic system, that quote unquote democratic system. You're never going to be a part of that duopoly and actually be able to fight for anything that is anti-imperialist, that is anti-capitalist. It's not going to happen.
But how much of that is the fault of, and I don't want to sound harsh when I say this, but I'm afraid I have to sound harsh because I've been in such a bad mood with lots of stuff that's going on in Canada. But how much of the horrible state of affairs? Because many people would say, because I know many people, I think like-minded folks would say that Jesse Jackson, like Bernie Sanders later, that Jesse Jackson back then, Bernie Sanders of today, are just sheep herders. They're just like sheeping the herd into the slaughter that is the Democratic Party. But what would you say to folks who say that it's really not Bernie's fault, although you can criticize whatever shortcomings he has and Jesse Jackson, but it's more of the fault of, and this is where my harsh language comes in, our pathetic excuse of a left, which spends more time propping up an Obama, a Clinton, not helping out a Jesse Jackson or a Bernie Sanders, and then doesn't want to engage in independent advocacy or just independent politics of the duopoly, PSL, Green Party.
Let me put this question a different way, right?
Okay.
You are a person who has your own mind and your own ability to think things, right? Do you need the populace to tell you anything that you believe about anything? Like, are you relying on what the general population says to make your assessments about things? Because Jackson, all these people have brains, right? And so as a singular person, you could decide that you are not just going to be complicit. Like, I don't believe in this idea of, well, we can't blame Bernie. Like, the people aren't demanding it. Bernie is a person who has a brain, who can read and who can speak and who makes a choice about what he says when he's before other people, right?
Bernie could be following the excellent advice of Lenin to always vote the same way in the Senate, period, regardless of what deals he thinks he can make, and to always unequivocally advocate for the interests of the working class. My question for both of you is, does Bernie do that?
No.
So there you go. I mean, the only purpose.
That's my point, right?
Yep.
Like, everybody is all about people, being individuals and blah, blah. And then the minute the person fails to do the thing that they've promised to do, it's everybody else's fault.
And
right?
And
like, no. People make the choices that they make because they are more interested in maintaining their status, their bag, their popularity, whatever. Like Jared, and I don't even remember what he calls the triangle, but you cannot be rich, radical, and popular. Right?
Yeah.
Those three things
you can't be any of those things at the same time if you're like a musician or an actor or anything, or an artist
right?
of story.
And so at the core of it, people always have to choose. And unfortunately, most people choose rich and popular. Very few people choose radical or revolutionary, because if you choose that, you cannot be rich. Definitely. You likely cannot be popular, but that's the choice that you choose to make, right? And so for as long as Bernie Sanders has been in this political game, right? Like, he ain't just get here. He's been in this political game for decades now, right? And all he's learned to do is say just enough so people think he's about something while he's doing literally nothing and supporting all of the things that are the wrong things to support for somebody who claims to be somebody who's a socialist.
You kind of end up having to do that when you make the mistake of believing in an all-powerful deity who has created man in his image, or so we say, when really we've created him in our image. There's a great quote. There's a great quote from the wonderful Cold War play Inherit the Wind. God created man in his own image, and man, being a gentleman, returned the favor. And I think it's important we understand that Jesse Jackson, in the end, was a preacher, a Christian, someone who believes, as some folks have been saying here in the chat, man alone cannot solve these problems. Now, if you believe that man alone can't solve the problems, then we are faced with the book of Revelation, where God has to intervene by throwing a whole lot of men into the lake of fire. Now,
I was just about to say I used to be a Christian deist, and if you follow the logic, God created the earth but left us to govern ourselves. So God ain't going to save us; only we can save us.
I'm going to stay away from my own beliefs right now, because this isn't Sunday, and I don't want to preach too much about my own beliefs. I think that atheism is its own set of mistakes, as bad as mainstream Christianity. I think that, but it is important.
All of the best atheists are Zionists.
Oh, no, it's worse than that. If you look at the founders of the new atheist movement in the 90s and the early 2000s, they're all Christians now.
That's true.
If not vocally Christian, like Ayaan
Hirsi Ali. Ayaan Hirsi Ali, one of the greatest con women of our time.
I say young lady because she was young when she became famous. She's middle-aged now. But Ayaan Ali Hirsi from Sudan, who became extremely famous for her aggressive atheism, is a Christian now.
Yep.
Richard Dawkins has said he's culturally Christian.
Yeah.
There's nobody as Christian as an atheist.
And I'm sure if that miserable alcoholic fuck Christopher Hitchens was still alive, he might have become a born again Christian like his far right brother Peter Hitchens.
I mean, Christopher Hitchens went from thinking Christianity was the worst thing to ever happen to the planet to think that Islam was the worst thing to ever happen to the planet. Because of a plane crash he was nowhere near.
And then he went from mildly criticizing Zionism to basically being an apologist for Zionism.
Being an apologist for a war to remake the Middle East, for which Israel was basically the spearhead.
Unfucking believable.
And the Jordan Peterson school of Christianity embraces a whole lot of ideas that the new atheists loved. So I'm getting that out there too.
Ghastly people, a lot of them.
I will say that if people are interested in actual Christianity, they should study the Munster Rebellion and the sermons of Melchior Hoffman, and they should study Anabaptism before it became pacifist. But ultimately, the thing to remember is that Christianity, so to speak, is really about us having to solve our own problems and help each other and stop waiting for God to do everything. And that the idea that God needs to personally intervene to make the world a better place is actually fundamentally the Antichrist. But now that we've gotten away from that, I do want to talk about the fact that, Jesse Jackson was part of this political class in general that tells us we have to settle for what's possible, whether it's, two-state solution in the world court in 2024, which might be the correct thing to say, but let's point out that the world court, even though it is currently prosecuting Israel, has been having a great deal of trouble prosecuting Israel, is getting lots of pushback from the rest of the UN for prosecuting Israel. And in fact, Lebanon was probably invaded because the president of the world court who agreed to prosecute Israel was in fact also the prime minister of Lebanon.
Oh, I completely missed that. Interesting.
Yeah, he was elected prime minister of Lebanon not too long after the world court decision, and then Lebanon got invaded. Just saying.
Yeah.
What do you think, Renee?
I think that there's always evidence to prove that at any time where a sovereign nation chooses to do something that is going to be counter what the project of Western hegemony is, that you are going to see that there is some result and some pushback that includes killing regular working poor people wherever they may be. And even it's unfortunate, like this is, I don't doubt at all that could play a role in it. But I also think that, this, when you looked at so there, I've been talking a lot about the hubris of the US, right? And that when the West decides that it's going to start these fights in places, it is always with the presumption that they're going to go and they're going to drop a bomb, and they're going to send the CIA, or they're going to send some secret troop or whatever. And they're going to be able to just do whatever they want. And there's not going to be any pushback, and there's going to be no response, and they can take over, and it's just going to go the way they want it to go, because there is literally the inability to understand that just because people are not Western white, it doesn't mean that they can't think. It doesn't mean they're not engineers. It doesn't mean they can't build things. It doesn't mean they can't, like all of these things, right?
And it doesn't mean things like, people are automatically homophobic because they're Muslim. I mean, there's been some beautiful lesbian weddings in Beirut that I wish people paid more attention to.
And so what we're seeing right now is the cost of that hubris, right? And so there's also a part of this, of what's happening, that's just like, well, we've decided that we're also going to take over Lebanon.
Yep.
And so we're just going to start bombing the Lebanese people because, you know, this way, if we can get everybody to be afraid, they'll turn against their own government, they'll turn against their revolutionary strategists, and they'll just comply with what the Western world wants them to do. And it, you know, it's equally disturbing and thrilling for me to watch people be like, no, like the millions of people in Iran who just go out into the streets every day while bombs are dropping.
Yeah.
Right. The Palestinians who set up tables amongst the rubble to celebrate the iftar at the end of every night during Ramadan. Like, these are things that show that the idea that Western people have about what is happening in other places in the world is complete farce. They have no clue. They have zero understanding, right?
Also, I got one question. One question related to Jesse Jackson, and then let's go deep dive into where this conversation is going because it's fascinating. But I just want to say that, you know, just sort of to add on to that. Like, you know how in Lebanon, you know, the big boogeyman is Hezbollah. The Lebanese state is crippled by Hezbollah.
So Hezbollah isn't the big boogeyman in Lebanon. Hezbollah is the big boogeyman in the West, used to make us dislike Lebanon. Let's be clear.
Although there's a lot of efforts within Lebanon itself that Hezbollah is a puppet of Iran and is part of the reason why shit can't get done. But one of my favorite stories, though, two of my favorite stories when it comes to Hezbollah and how widely popular they are amongst all communities, secular, God-fearing, Shia conservative to Sunni and so forth, is these two stories which I love and I still laugh my ass off when I think about them. Is the following. So there's this like corrupt, like far right, mobbed up Bulgarian Prime Minister Boyko Borisov, who was involved in this huge like human trafficking thing with Erdogan's son and so forth, and they had like suitcases of of cash which they were going to put in a dodgy Lebanese bank and so forth. So they got their handlers. Handlers are in Lebanon, and they're on their way to the. They're on their way, but they got robbed by Hezbollah. And I'm sure Hezbollah used that money for very good things like helping out their impoverished communities and resistance to the Zionist state. And then my other favorite story I love about Lebanon, which I don't remember if it was Mara Osman who told me this story or Julia Kassam, but somebody told me this story, and that in Lebanon, it's like very common for like the military and the police to like try to find like these Hezbollah people that are involved in like arms trafficking and stuff like that. And apparently like every time like a Hezbollah like character like talks to like these beer drinking Lebanese people, they'll say like you didn't see us or anything like that. And every time like the soldiers and the military police come, everybody's like, Hezbollah, not hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. So that's who the West thinks that they can beat. Yeah.
The West thinks that they can solve, that we can solve any problem by applying enough violence to the people who are resisting our attempts to cause it.
Oh, wait 1 second. But yeah, yeah. So
back on topic, because we're not going to solve the Middle East today. Jesse Jackson's view of the conflict, that we just need to listen to international law in 2024, was definitely a bit out of touch.
Yeah. And I would also say, okay. Sorry, folks. Actually, okay. So, in a nutshell, before we change subject a little bit, but still related to this, because I actually wanted to ask you, Renee, on Mamdani. So in a nutshell, do you think, okay, even if we do give Jesse and his left movement credit where credit is due, in the end of the day, who cares, because all it did was empower people to join the Democrats and think that they could change it. But really, the Democrats have continued to be more and more right-wing, and yeah, just like all of that racial, social justice stuff, none of that gets advanced.
So I was never a Mamdani fan, and my take on him literally was the best purpose that a Mamdani can serve is to give people any idea at all that maybe the word socialism is not as frightening as they thought it was, right?
Yeah.
The problem with that, of course, is as he outrageously fails to do the multitude of things that people think should be done because they think he's actually a socialist when he's not, it'll create its own set of problems. But, Mamdani is it's such a I get so frustrated by all of these things because at the core of it, people are really desperate for something to happen that's going to be beneficial for their own material conditions, right? And because people are desperate for change in their own material conditions, they are easily deceived by people who offer crumbs towards that effort, right?
But 10% of people own more than half of everything, and they're not going to let us vote their ownership away.
Right. And so it's just, it's just the whole thing is just crazy. There's a great article in Scalawag.
Yeah.
Folks,
I love Scalawag
magazine. That's called Zoran Mamdani and the Sorcery of Soft Rebellion.
Yes.
And it's a fantastic look at how when you allow people to drag you into this Democratic Party farce and this belief that if you just work within the party, you are literally being captured by a group of people who have no interest in doing anything that's beneficial for the majority of people. And the term soft rebellion is just so, it's like chef's kiss. That's like,
yeah.
Right?
Well, when it comes, Renee and Chris, actually, can I ask this question about Mamdani?
Sure.
Oh, thanks. So I wanted to ask you this question, Renee, about Mamdani. I think we had somebody who's involved in tenants' rights and so forth, who was, I think, a little bit more optimistic about Mamdani, although still, we still have to see, how the rest of the term goes. My thing with Mamdani is the following, and again, I actually agree with a lot of what you just said about Mamdani. My problem with and I don't even think it's Mamdani himself; it's his supporters and those who really do fashion themselves as being on the far left of U.S. politics and Palestinian justice. Now, okay, if you support Mamdani because you really do think he's going to give you that upping of the minimum wage if you work at McDonald's, and if you really think Mamdani is going to help with whatever is that vague, stupid thing about the groceries and stuff like that, or he's going to spend more on food stamps and all that social justice stuff that we constantly take for granted. Okay, by all means, if you think he's going to be your guy to do this, by all means, vote for him. I would say keep your expectations low. And if you think that, that the Bernie Sanders AOC endorsements means that he is the real deal, then by all means, you can vote for him and you can try to encourage other people to vote for him. My problem, though, with Mamdani, but it's mostly his supporters. And again, it's the people who fashion themselves as being on the far left of U.S. politics and the medical palliatives folks is the following. Don't act like he's going to be that he's going to stick it to the empire and that he's going to be the best friends to Palestine when he clearly has pimped popular Palestine solidarity and has completely thrown that under the bus. And I just find it bizarre that no offense to my comrades at Breakthrough News. I love the work of Rania Khalek and so forth. Some of our comrades at PSL, or this influencer, this lefty influencer, Blakely, who was very big on Mamdani, I was just quite baffled that they were all, and Katie Halper, all like going through Mamdani mania when in real time he was already throwing Palestine solidarity, which is supposed to be their raison d'etre, under the bus. Which again goes back to, if we want to, relitigate Jesse Jackson, that I don't even think it's really these figures' problem. I actually think it's what we call the left. There's just some kind of a deeper rot that's happening, I find, in politics and in people power movements that I just find quite mind baffling. I'm curious your response and Chris's response.
You said and Chris. I wasn't sure. I was waiting to make sure that I didn't.
I thought my laptop froze for a moment. I was like, "Uh-oh, what happened?" Okay.
So again, and so in the end, it also should be really understood. Like, for as much as yes, I like Halper, she's a liberal. Right? Like I don't know why anybody expected anything different, right? And at the core of it, you have a lot of I really struggle with what I like to call the online left, even though I know people take issue with that terminology, because
use it, for fuck's sake, use it. There's no other way to describe them.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot at play here that is more about the person who's trying to make sure that they keep their audience than it is about doing anything that's going to be beneficial for the people who are watching, right?
I mean, I follow Katie Halper. I follow Brianna Joy Gray. I love their takes. I think they do great things in the media space. But in the end, I mean, in the end, they're liberals who have who operate within a very privileged circle of radicals who don't have to deal with the consequences of their defeats. Katie Halper was very happy to defend Matt Taibbi for years, because of her belief that he was a good guy and her, financial interest in that belief, because they were doing a show together. And then he disappeared on a quote unquote leave. And then he never, ever, ever came back. Why not? Because he wasn't interested in still being associated with people like Katie. But through a long stretch of that, she was still defending him because she thought he was going to come back.
Ironically, though, no offense to Aaron Matze, but the AIs of the world completely agree with me when I say this. Matt Taibbi's a much better comedy partner to Katie Halper than Aaron is.
Matt Taibbi, I can't agree with that, because Matt Taibbi embodies that sort of useless Dane Cook, Carlos Mencia 90s humor where they were all stealing from each other anyway.
Fair enough. I mean, hey, the guy that exposed, the guy that exposed a lot of us angry lefties to being, angry lefties, Griftopia, is now one of the greatest grifters ever. So
let's get back to Renee here and back on our topic. And my question for you is simple. Should we perhaps maybe talk less about specific personalities?
Yes.
And more about historical forces, because as communists, we don't believe in great man theory.
Except for Lenin, Stalin, Ho Chi Minh, Mao, Kim Jong-il, Che Guevara, and Fidel Castro, and Marshal Tito.
in the end, I think, and this is absolutely the issue when you think about Jackson and all these people, is there is way too much weight given for individuals within political spaces. And then you end up literally like just falling into the trap because you're so busy praising and following and appreciating this one person that you're missing all the things that person also represents because you're just looking at the one person.
And you end up subordinating a lot of your free will to Jesse Jackson while he's subordinating his free will to Bill Clinton.
Right. And it's just the whole thing is messy. Messy Jesse, look at that. But
go ahead, Renee, sorry. No, I was just going to say, you calling him Messy Jackson, that it's reminding me so much of the very controversial Colin Mohammed, who called him Messy Jesse Jackson.
That's where I got it from.
Somebody. I am somebody. I really don't know who the hell I am, but I am somebody.
I mean,
it is. It's. And again, I bring people back to when I started this conversation and making sure that people understand that I am a person who was a child in 84 and 88 and watched this all happening with full cognizance of what was happening. I wasn't a 2-year-old just staring at the TV. I was an elementary and middle school student. I was very, very clear on what was happening. And at the time, the representation of Jesse Jackson was brilliant in my mind. That I am somebody was brilliant in my mind. Like all of these things were things that moved me as a kid, like being reminded, like, you know what, your blackness does not mean that your humanity doesn't count. These are all very important things, yes, but we have to disassociate them from the person, right? Because we did not need Jesse Jackson then, nor should we need Jesse Jackson now to appreciate our own humanities, right? And we have to get away from this consistent desire to follow someone else as they are doing a thing or presenting a thing or being a thing or whatever, and just learn to be someone who appreciates the humanity of other people. And if you can be brave enough to stand by that, 10 toes down, that I believe in the humanity of other people, and no matter what consequence comes with your belief that everyone has a right to their humanity simply because they're breathing people, right? We'd all be in a better place. And then you wouldn't have to worry about listening to someone else tell you what to do or who to support or what to say and all these things. Because at the core of it, if you trust that everyone is deserving of their humanity, you don't really need anything else.
On that note, Renee, how much more time before you have to rush off?
About 4 minutes, because the child is waiting for me to be Uber. I got to go play.
Okay, very quickly. I have to ask you this question because you have such a busy schedule all the time. What do you think it's going to take for the U.S. left to show urgent solidarity to the plight of Native Americans, Indigenous Hawaiians, and Native Alaskans? I never got to ask you that question when you were on 1+1. So
wait,
thank you, Chris. Here I am now.
You were rushing it. Say it one more time. What
do you think it's going to take for the people power movements in the U.S. to show more urgent solidarity to Native Americans, Indigenous Hawaiians, and Indigenous Alaskans?
I mean, the same thing I just said. The problem is, again, like, people are here because someone else before them came here, right? And so now you have all these people who live in the United States who claim to be Americans, which, for fuck's sake, it's not a thing. There's no such thing, right? Like, everyone is part of the Americas, right? The United States is not America, like, literally.
Well, so, I do want to say one thing here. I can't help it. The linguistic, let's say it. I'm anal about words. I can't help it.
I know you are.
It's not the United States. The same way it's not the United States of Mexico. Because remember, if we were just talking about the United States, there are two United States.
Yes.
There's the United States of America, and there's the United States of Mexico.
Yes.
America is a country formed up by United States, and Mexico is a country formed up by United States. Right. So American is a thing, but it's a very exclusive thing. And many of us who might want to call ourselves Americans are not part of the club.
Yeah.
So I guess yes, correct. But then people should say, I'm a United States of American.
Well, but then they'd have to say they're a United States of Mexican, and it would get confusing.
Right. So,
or they would have to say, I'm an immigrant who benefits a lot off the theft of Indigenous Turtle Islanders and Indigenous Hawaiians and Alaskans.
And at the core of it, the real issue, in my opinion, is that people who were brought here because their forefathers came here before them believe that this is their place, like that this space and this country, or whatever you want to call, that it belongs to them.
Jesse Jackson supported Zionism because Jesse Jackson, like all people who are true patriotic Americans, was a Christian Zionist.
Right.
Oh,
in the true sense, America as the city on the hill for the godly world.
Right. Right. And so until people understand that just because somebody who's in your line got here before you, it doesn't mean that you have the right to determine what the people who were actually here when they got here should have access to. And people get mad at me. They're like, well, what if somebody came and said, like, this was their land? I'd be like, okay, I'll go pack my stuff. That's
very sweet of you because that's very sweet of you because there's a lot of what the fuck I'll call it, black nationalists who really do think no, like, this is our land and so forth. Like, okay, we'll accommodate the American land back.
I can't even go down that road with them. I do not. I avoided it successfully for a good little bit now because I do not have the patience level to deal with absolute horseshit. I just can't. I can't.
Let's just say that while there's a lot of intermixture between Indigenous Americans and Black Americans, the biological argument that Native Americans and Black Americans are the same people and that Indigenous Americans should be considered Black, it isn't very good biology. Let's just leave it at that.
I agree with that. It's a very controversial opinion for me to say that, but I do agree with what you just said.
Biology is less important than culture anyway. Most of these groups that we think of as racial started out by people as being people who agreed to speak the same language together. On that note, I just have to say, Renee, I know you've got to go. Do you have any final thoughts before I wrap us up?
No, I mean, I always appreciate the invite. Youri, I think we were going to try and do something last month, and then that didn't happen. But you have my email, bruh. So just
and I am going to email. And actually, you have nothing to apologize. It's all me. I got sick a lot in February. It was not a good Black History Month. So, but don't worry. I'm gonna reach out to you, and I want to do a show with you all about your home country of Jamaica. So,
oh Lord, I'm so mad at them right now. Not Jamaicans, but the
government.
Yeah.
At least you're not from Trinidad and Tobago, though.
Well, honestly, the differentials, like the way they're awful is just different, and they're just awful in different ways. I don't,
I have a friendly acquaintance who used to teach at Emory in Atlanta, and now teaches at York University in Toronto, of all places. Dr. Tamanisha John, everybody should follow her on Twitter if they don't already.
Yeah.
It's hard to come out 1+1. Tell her we cover a lot of Canadian topics.
but she's originally from Trinidad. Her family's originally from Trinidad and Tobago, and she's had a lot of very interesting coverage of their government's reaction to Trump's piracy campaign in the Caribbean, which nobody should forget about.
Like the way they gave up the space so that they could spy on the seas using
the Trinidadian government basically saying we totally support the United States in its effort to blow up any of our fishermen they think are Venezuelan.
Yeah, it's awful.
Hey, at least, hey, to me, there's nothing more embarrassing than my mom comes from the Congo. I refuse to call it the Democratic Republic. It is still the Banana Republic of the Congo, and because Mobutu was overthrown in the Western-backed coup, I still controversially call it Zaire, and there is nothing more embarrassing than to see Rwanda and Uganda, backed by the West, run rough on Congo, and the Congolese army still doesn't go full speed ahead and eject those motherfuckers out of the country.
So here's my joke.
You want to talk about chumps and traitors to the human race?
So here's my joke to end our conversation before I close this out for the day. Now that we've gotten so much more of the content of the Epstein files out there, is Paul Kagame going to start catching heat for being such good friends with Bill Gates?
Never.
No.
To answer very quickly that question, Eve Engler, good friend of mine who ran, was barred from running in the NTP leadership race. One of the disgusting smear attacks on him, apart from being an anti-Semite, was that he was a Rwandan genocide denialist. And I'll just leave it at that. There are way too many people who believe the official bullshit story of Paul Kagame as this savior who then, like Israel, takes out his anger on people who don't deserve to take it out. But there are people who say that Rwanda has the right to pillage Congo, even though we've not done absolutely anything.
The Rwandan genocide was real. The Rwandan genocide was real. The Hutu-connected government may have killed their own president in order to do the genocide, but no one benefited from that genocide more than Paul Kagame.
Yeah, because he was the one that shot down the planes. That's the big controversy. He was not the guy who saved Rwanda. He was literally the guy that started all the mass murder.
If Kagame did shoot down the planes, there was a good chance he shot down the planes in cahoots with the same Hutu radicals who did the genocide that he then fought against. But that's a whole nother show.
Exactly.
I've done a Paul Kagame show before. I'm very interested in doing a Paul Kagame show again in the future, but that's a different show.
I can try to get even Ann Garrison for that.
Thank you so much for the invite again, Chris. Youri, it was good to see you. We'll talk.
Likewise, Renee. I will get in touch with you. I promise. And Oh, and Renee, you make sure you give all my love and best to Jared Ball, who is a 1+1 fan favorite. Every time he's on the program, the views are amazing, and
I bet.
So
and I'll be sure to let him know, Chris, that you much appreciated his take on.
I really enjoyed that series.
Fascinating. It is. I was like, you need to slap a trigger warning on this, Jared. Like, this is definitely not. It's not an easy watch. You gotta slap a warning on that before you send people down this rabbit hole. But I appreciate y'all. Let me go. Thanks so much, and I'll talk to everybody soon. Take care.
And everybody else, we're going to go ahead and end things up here. My final thought is, please, if you enjoyed this, like, subscribe, share, check out the Patreon. I don't have any plans yet for next Sunday and may end up taking it off since we just did a show that we just done 2 shows. I do hope to start sharing what I'm going to do next fairly soon. But if I take a little break and you just see some stuff going around on Patreon and Substack and some old videos circulating, that's why. In the meantime, you can always find me on X, on Blue Sky, and until we talk again on another Sunday, I'll tweet at you.